When our ancestors first marched into Europe around 60,000 years ago, they probably thought they were the absolute kings of the world. They had successfully left Africa, survived the heat, and developed some pretty neat stone tools. But as they huddled around their campfires in the freezing, dark European nights, they quickly realized they were not the apex predators here. Strange, heavy shadows were moving in the trees, and these weren't wild animals. Out of the darkness stepped humanoids that looked like they had been abusing steroids for a century. They were shorter, twice as wide, with giant lungs, massive brow ridges, and they were holding heavy wooden spears that could pierce a woolly mammoth. Welcome to the neighborhood. You've just met the Neanderthals, and honestly, they were not happy you moved in. For a very long time, pop culture and boring school textbooks taught us a specific story about Neanderthals. They were always depicted as dumb, dragging their knuckles on the floor, grunting like cave apes, and losing the evolutionary lottery because they were simply too stupid to compete with our brilliant, galaxy-brain ancestors. We were told that Homo sapiens arrived, outsmarted them, and drove them into extinction. But recent groundbreaking science has revealed that this story is complete garbage. Neanderthals were actually incredibly smart, insanely strong, and highly adapted. And when our ancestors met them, things didn't just get violent. They got very, very romantic. To truly understand how intense this first meeting was, you need to realize that Neanderthals were built like absolute biological tanks. While our African ancestors were tall, lean, and built for running long distances in the tropical heat, Neanderthals had been evolving in the brutal European Ice Age for hundreds of thousands of years. They were built short and stocky, which was a perfect evolutionary design to trap body heat. Imagine a professional rugby player mixed with a silverback gorilla, and you're getting close. Their bones were twice as thick as ours, and a typical Neanderthal male could easily win an Olympic weightlifting gold medal today without even warming up. If you got into a bar fight with a Neanderthal, you weren't just losing, you were being folded like a lawn chair. And they definitely were not stupid. In fact, archaeologists discovered that Neanderthals possessed brains that were actually slightly larger than ours. They made complex, sticky glue out of tree bark using a highly controlled chemical heating process to glue their spears together. Try doing that in a cave with no YouTube tutorials. They wore eagle talon jewelry, painted abstract art on cave walls long before Homo sapiens even arrived, and they used advanced medicinal plants to treat illnesses. They even cared for their elderly and buried their dead with flowers. So when Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, it wasn't a case of smart humans colonizing a bunch of dumb cave apes. It was two completely different, highly intelligent human species coming face to face. And that's when the ancient drama began. At first, there was definitely a lot of friction. Put two different species of alpha predators in the same valley, hunting the exact same mammoths and competing for the absolute best caves with a view, and you're going to get some serious reality TV-style drama. Territorial wars broke out, spears were thrown, and it was a brutal struggle for survival. But as the thousands of years slowly rolled by, the dynamic shifted. Our ancestors looked across the snowy valley, saw a muscular Neanderthal covered in bear fur around a campfire, and thought, well, they actually look kind of cute when the light hits them just right. We know this for a scientific fact today because geneticists have successfully mapped the entire Neanderthal genome from ancient bones. And here's the mind-blowing part. If your family background comes from anywhere outside of Africa, your personal DNA is currently between 1 and 2% Neanderthal. Yes, that means your direct great-great-great-grandparents actually went on prehistoric Tinder dates, fell in love, and had mixed babies with Neanderthals. And this wasn't just a random historical hookup, it was a massive biological cheat code for Homo sapiens. Our ancestors had just arrived from tropical Africa, and their immune systems were completely defenseless against the harsh European viruses, bacteria, and nasty infections lurking in the cold climate. One sneeze could wipe out a whole tribe. But Neanderthals had been living there for over 200,000 years, meaning their bodies had already evolved the perfect genetic defense mechanisms. By interbreeding with the Neanderthals, our ancestors instantly stole their immune system genes. Sleeping with the locals is literally what gave our bodies the biological armor needed to conquer the continent. But this raises a massive mystery. If Neanderthals were so incredibly strong, highly intelligent, and we were literally marrying into their families, why are there no Neanderthals walking down the street today? Why did they completely vanish from the face of the earth around 40,000 years ago? Well, it wasn't a brutal, dramatic genocide. Homo sapiens did not launch a massive prehistoric war to wipe them out. Instead, it was mostly a quiet game of numbers. Homo sapiens arrived from Africa in massive, endless waves of migration, while Neanderthal populations were already very small, scattered, and lonely. When a massive population mixes with a tiny population over thousands of years, the smaller group slowly gets absorbed. Neanderthals didn't completely die out. They just dissolved into us. You're looking at the living remnants of their extraordinary species every single time you look at your own face in the mirror. Our ancestors successfully won the demographic battle for Europe. But their next giant challenge was just around the corner, and it wasn't another human species. It was a terrifying, apocalyptic change in the planet itself. The weather began to change drastically as the Earth entered the peak of the last glacial maximum. This was the absolute coldest, most brutal, and most unforgiving ice age the world had ever seen, where massive sheets of ice covered half the continent and even parts of the oceans froze completely solid. The forests disappeared, the green valleys turned into frozen tundras, and the giant animals they hunted began to die off. Our ancestors were left stranded in a frozen wasteland with no central heating, no modern insulation, and zero room for error. Survival became a brutal game where a single mistake meant your entire tribe would freeze to death before sunrise. To make it through this frozen hell, they had to invent the most desperate, mind-blowing survival tricks imaginable. They started building large, complex houses using the massive bones and tusks of dead woolly mammoths, and they invented a tiny, simple object that would completely change the course of human history forever: the sewing needle. Click right here on the next video to discover how our ancestors freeze-proofed their lives, how they hunted deadly predators in the deep snow, and why a tiny piece of sharpened bone with a hole in it became the single most important technology that allowed humanity to conquer the frozen ends of the earth.